Hello and welcome to Movies You Missed podcast. We're getting into the swing of things here in 2025. How you doing today, John?
Doing very well, V. How are you? Good to be back after last week's fun time.
Totally agree. I'm doing well too, thank you. And really enjoying watching all these 2024 movies before our recap episode that's coming up in a couple weeks.
Oh, as am I. I am cranking through a lot of 2024 films. Albeit theater or streaming, mostly streaming, but there are still a couple of 2024 movies that are thankfully still in theaters that I have not yet seen, and I'm very excited to get into those as well.
Agreed, and I'm really going to try this year in 2025 to have a little more regular cadence for our audience of watching the new movies as they come out and trying to really schedule some time every single week to get at least one 2025 movie under my belt so our audience isn't subjected to our long list of movies that we've seen over the last week and the last couple of weeks that we've been doing this.
Well, this week I will say that I saw two 2025 films, so we'll get into that in just a few minutes.
Yes, that's a good start. I usually actually hold off until we've done our 2024 recap to start watching 2025 films, and I do that every year just because I want a nice differentiation, a delineation, as it were, between the 2 years.
Sure, I get that. I won't obviously include 2025 movies that I've seen in our 2024 recap.
Of course.
But, movies that we've seen, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, I saw them. So, can't not talk about them.
Well, that's exactly why I'm not going to watch Den of Thieves for a couple weeks.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, so I've seen a few 2025 movies. I thought I had only seen two.
No.
I guess I've seen more than that.
Yep.
So it feels like they're from 2024, I guess, with the way that the world feels right now. I don't know. It's weird. It still feels weird that we're in January of 2025.
I agree, while at the same time, 2024 felt very long.
That it did.
But before we get into the new movies we've seen this week, hello everyone, we are V and John. We are industry veterans who love to recommend movies to you without spoiling them. And this week, we are going to save Matt Damon.
Yeah, we are.
We decided to pick two sci-fi movies that center around saving that American hero, that American treasure, the man that we've known for many, many years on the silver screen. And I'm really looking forward to this episode.
Oh, you and me both.
Especially since the movie you picked is one of your all-time favorites.
It absolutely is.
So we'll get into that in just a minute, but before we do that, as you guys know, and as we've just said, we love to discuss the new movies we've seen either in theaters or on streaming this week.
Yes, let's get into those.
John, why don't you kick us off talking about the many movies we each saw this week?
Okay, I thought maybe you'd want to go first. I think you actually watched a few more than me this last week.
That's true, but chivalry is not dead.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
I watched 4 in theaters and 2 on streaming over the last week, and only one disappointment, so I will start with the movie that I definitely did not enjoy. I went and saw Leigh Whannell's new directed film, Wolfman.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it sucked. It's not good. It's definitely the most disappointing movie of the year. Now, granted, we're only 3 weeks into the year, but so far, this kind of reminds me of how last year began with Immaculate being one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and this one also follows along that line. So, Wolfman is not good. I do not recommend it.
Was it not scary, or did it have a stupid script?
It wasn't scary.
Okay.
The script was very boring, and it just...
sucked.
It did. Yeah, it did. Just before that, I did go see the new Count of Monte Cristo French adaptation, the 3-hour-long epic based off of Alexander Dumas' novel. I read the novel several years ago with my friends Angie and Joel, and we watched the Guy Pearce, Jim Caviezel adaptation, which was a complete travesty, an insult to the novel, and this movie is a far better adaptation of the classic novel. I had a really good time with it. The theater was actually a lot busier than I thought it would be, especially for an 8 o'clock show on a Monday night, and everybody gave it a round of applause at the end, so definitely check out The Count of Monte Cristo.
Nice.
After that, I went and saw Timothée Chalamet, and I did not know Elle Fanning was in this movie, but I went and saw the new James Mangold directed A Complete Unknown about Bob Dylan.
Yes, I've heard nothing but wonderful things about this film.
And they're all true.
Awesome.
Completely fell in love with this movie. Timothy is definitely getting an Oscar nomination. I don't know if he'll get a win. It seems that Adrian Brody's the real favorite right now, but A Complete Unknown is an absolute 2 thumbs up tour de force performance by Timothée Chalamet. Edward Norton's great in it. It's an all-around fantastic film.
Good.
And then I watched a couple movies on streaming. I watched the latest Liam Neeson film, In the Land of Saints and Sinners.
Haven't ever heard of that one. He's doing a lot of direct-to-DVD style movies lately.
Yeah, this one actually did get a theatrical release here. I just did not get a chance to see it. It's set in Ireland during the Civil War in the 70s, and it was a good time. I had a great time. Jack Gleason's in it. If you don't know him by name, he was Joffrey Lannister in Game of Thrones, so he is now acting again, and he was a badass in this movie, too.
Oh, I'm so glad he's acting again.
Yeah, he's great. It took me a few minutes because I was like, he looks completely different. And I was like, wait a minute, that's totally Joffrey. And Amy was watching it with me too. She goes, yeah, it's totally him. And, IMDb'd him, and sure enough, it was.
Aww.
So In the Land of Saints and Sinners, definitely worth a watch. Pretty intense flick.
Cool.
Yes, and then, oddly enough, I watched a Netflix movie over the weekend. This is the new Cameron Diaz, Jamie Foxx film, Back in Action.
Oh, God, I hope it's good just because I'm so happy to have Cameron Diaz back.
And it is actually very, very enjoyable.
Oh,
it was
thank God.
Very funny, pretty much
good.
from the get-go. Yeah, it's worth a watch. I think it's like an hour and 45 minutes. Nothing we haven't seen before, but Cameron Diaz back is great. She's hysterical. Jamie Foxx is funny. Great action sequences. A lot of fun. I kind of wish it went to theaters, to be honest.
So a lot better than The Family Plan, which was basically the same story with Mark Wahlberg last year.
Yes. It's funny. There's totally a sequence that reminded me of The Family Plan, and I'm like, well, this is doing it far better than that one.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, but I know you liked The Family Plan, so.
I did, but I'm excited that this one could be better.
Yeah, this one was a lot of fun. I actually told my parents about it. It's PG-13 rated. It's a good one. Check it out.
Okay.
And I'm going to hold off for you to discuss the movies that you saw, because we both just saw this movie last night. So I'm curious, V, what did you watch before we discussed the movie we both watched?
I'm so proud of myself. I watched 7 movies last week.
Yeah! You beat me by 2.
Well, it helps that I had a very long flight last week, so I
That's also true.
went in prepared, downloaded multiple movies to my laptop, and sat back and enjoyed the show. And enjoy it I did. I actually had a lot of fun with most of these movies. Even if some of them weren't amazing, I still had a good time with them. But there was one I actually hated.
Oh, okay. Well, let's get into it. I'm curious.
Kit Harington, Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, led this movie called The Beast Within.
Oh, okay.
It is about a family who is secluded in the woods, and the father turns into what seems like a wolf man. This movie's not good. It had a cool premise because it was being told from the perspective of their daughter. There was a lot of promise there. I think it could have been a good movie, but it just wasn't executed very well, so you can definitely skip The Beast Within.
All right.
I then watched Lee, the Kate Winslet-led biopic about Lee Miller, who was an American photojournalist who documented the war. And she was a woman, so it was a really big deal that she documented World War II. Sorry, I said the war. World War II is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
The fact that this is a true story is very cool. Alexander Skarsgård is also in this movie.
Nice.
So is Andy Samberg.
Really?
Yeah, and everyone was great in this movie. Josh O'Connor, who plays young Prince Charles in The Crown, is also in it. I really love this story. I want to read the biography so much because I don't think the movie... It was just missing a little bit for me. It's definitely not a bad movie, but it made me more excited to read the book than it did for me to be excited about watching this film, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah,
so it introduced me to her, which I appreciate, but the film itself, I was just like, okay. So, of course, Kate Winslet was amazing because she always is, but otherwise, I think there were just a couple key missing pieces of the film for me to straight up recommend it.
All right. I heard about it briefly. I think it might be on streaming now on HBO or something, but I do want to see it.
It's on Hulu.
It's on Hulu. Great.
Yeah.
Well, then it's streaming.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it is streaming. And then I stuck with the biopics and watched Maria, an Angelina Jolie-led film about Maria Callas, who was a famous opera singer in the 20th century. I actually hadn't heard of her before, but it's a pretty good biopic. By the end of the film, I was like, okay, that was a movie about Maria Callas. I'm glad I learned more about her life, but it just didn't make me so emotional or touch me enough where I would say, oh yes, you have to watch this film. Angelina Jolie is great. I'm glad she's acting again, but otherwise, you could take it or leave it.
All right.
And then I watched a movie that you watched months and months and months ago, and I finally watched it because now it's on Apple TV. I watched the Scarlett Johansson, Channing Tatum-led Fly Me to the Moon.
Yeah.
I really liked this film. I thought the storyline was really fun. I love Woody Harrelson, and his character in this film is fantastic.
So good.
I just think that Scarlett Johansson is pretty damn talented. I was very impressed with her in this film. I don't think Channing Tatum could keep up with her.
Oh, you don't think so?
He was too stoic. He doesn't have enough range, and he couldn't play off of her well enough for this to be a head-to-head movie like they were really wanting it to.
Okay.
And so I think a stronger actor would have carried this movie much better with Scarlett Johansson. I think it would have been a better movie because of it. No hate to Channing. I think he's a great guy. But I just think a stronger actor would have done better and made this movie much better, because he felt very just one note, and that he had gotten the direction of, oh, you're a straight-laced guy and you're very honest, and that's your job. And that was kind of it. So that was the one negative aspect for Fly Me to the Moon. Otherwise, tons of fun. Definitely watch it if you have any interest in NASA or space travel. I thought it was the perfect film to watch this week, given our topics, given the film picks we have this week for the episode 2. So I was really happy to get that under my belt.
Awesome.
I watched another documentary this week, too. It's on Amazon Prime. It is produced by Glenn Powell, who was in Top Gun Maverick. It is about the Blue Angels.
Oh, nice.
It's not an exciting film, but it's a very fascinating, informative film. I loved learning more about the Blue Angels. I've been seeing them since I was a kid because I used to live near San Francisco. They're so cool, and the cinematography of this film is crazy amazing. I was so stoked to just sit back, and so many times I was like, holy shit! What they do up in the air is so incredible. I was so impressed. The storyline isn't super exciting because it just follows them through their year of training and then putting on shows, and it was more about going behind the curtain. I really liked learning about all of their crews behind them, so it's really awesome. So I definitely recommend it for anybody who is a fan of flying or just wants to see some incredible cinematography and air action, because it's a really beautiful film.
Nice.
And then the last film I saw this week, you and I watched together last night. I was so excited that we could watch a movie in tandem, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. So John, why don't you tell our audience what we watched?
Alrighty, we both ended up going to see the Robbie Williams biopic, where he is actually a monkey in the movie, directed by Michael Gracie, who directed The Greatest Showman. Better Man.
Yes.
I'm thinking you liked it.
Why don't you tell our audience what you thought of it first?
No, I think you should go first.
Damn it. Okay, fine. I thought it was a cheap ripoff of Rocket Man.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying it's very similar to Rocket Man. I don't think it's cheap. I had a good time with it, though. I didn't know anything about Robbie Williams. I remember one song of his from like 20-some-odd years ago, and I was like, oh, that's a cool song. But after that, I'd never heard anything other than that song. So this was a musical awakening for me. I thought a lot of the sequences were really good. The music is pretty awesome, in my opinion, I think. And I had a good time with it. I didn't, like you said earlier, I didn't get emotionally involved at all with this movie. I wouldn't say it's like going to be nominated for Best Picture or anything like that, but for what they pulled off, I thought was pretty awesome.
I'm a casual fan of Robbie Williams. I will always remember his music video where he rips his skin off. That was a really cool music video back in the early 2000s. I have listened to his music before, so I was familiar with most of his songs. I didn't know much about his life, but as this movie went on from the beginning, actually, every single turning point in his life I predicted. This was such a predictable, formulaic movie. And granted, it's a formulaic rock star life. I get it. It's his life.
Sure.
But he went through the same exact motions that most rock stars go through, that everybody can imagine what a rock star goes through. His dad leaves. He gets kicked out of the band. He's got drug problems. Like, everybody knows exactly what this story is. I needed something fresher. I needed something more to keep me invested in this movie and not be bored and thinking about what's coming next and knowing what's coming next.
Interesting.
And in that way, I didn't enjoy my time with it. I actually was going to put it on my movies you should miss list because of that. I thought the way they told the story was cool and ambitious, that he always felt like an outsider, which is why he's a monkey during the whole entire film.
Right. A friend of mine said, he was like, it's very similar to Rocket Man, but this friend of mine, Shane, he said he liked it over A Complete Unknown. I think I like A Complete Unknown a little bit more, but I didn't know much about Robbie Williams. I thought the music was good. I thought the rock DJ sequence was awesome.
Yeah, that is a good sequence.
All those dancers are practical dancers.
Mm-hmm.
They're not CGI'd in, and they all got a credit, which was awesome. So I think a lot of what they pulled off was pretty badass. But, everybody's opinion is valid. Yeah,
I think this will be a really interesting conversation when we get to our lists for our recap of 2024, because I think you and I will put these in totally different categories.
It's possible.
So those are the movies that we watched this week.
Those are them.
As we said, we are watching a lot of 2024 movies before our recap. Stay tuned for that. As I said, it's going to be coming up in a couple weeks. The first week of February, I believe.
I believe you are correct.
Great. Well, we're both looking forward to that. We hope you are too. And so now it's time to get into this week's episode and this week's movies. And as we said, we're saving Matt Damon. And John, I believe you go first this week.
Oh, boy.
I know you're very excited. So am I. So let's get into it.
All right, let's get into it. This will be my third Christopher Nolan film, which kind of works out because at this point, we're coming up on our third year very soon, and this will be my first of 2025 for a Christopher Nolan film, and last year I did one, and the year before I did one. So it sounds like I'm doing one a year.
So you can't do another Christopher Nolan movie for the rest of the year?
That's horrible. I probably will. So I guess we'll have to break that between now and the next time I choose one. I chose a film from 2014. If you were lucky enough over the last several weeks to catch the re-release in IMAX of the 10-year anniversary of this film, I want to talk to you because I was able to do it with my father and a couple of friends of mine. This is the Christopher Nolan epic masterpiece of space and time, Interstellar.
A movie that I hadn't seen since theaters in 2014.
I don't even know how that's possible. Similar to many, many, many episodes ago when you told me you hadn't even seen Independence Day for however many years.
Yeah, that's true.
This film is written by Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan, directed by the man, Sir Christopher Nolan, if I am being grammatically correct.
Yes, he just did receive his knighthood.
Yes, he did, and I'm so happy for him. He is a master, as I've discussed before with my episode of Memento and Tenet, although I did Tenet first and Memento second, which kind of actually worked out because Memento was backwards and Tenet was kind of backwards too.
Yeah.
So this film actually does go not so much linear with time, but it is actually one of his later films, again, from 2014. Came out November 7th of 2014, worldwide release in the United States and across the globe. This film stars Matthew McConaughey, John Lithgow, Timothée Chalamet, Mackenzie Foy, Jessica Chastain, Topher Grace, Casey Affleck, Anne Hathaway, Wes Bentley, Bill Irwin, Michael Caine, and Matt fucking Damon.
And I noticed Bill Irwin in the movie this time, and I was like, oh my gosh, from The Grinch.
Yes. When I did How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Ron Howard-directed, Jim Carrey-led film, Bill Irwin was Cindy Lou Who's father, and I finally put together that he was the voice of Tars in Interstellar. He was also the puppeteer of Tars on set as well.
So that man is legitimately talented.
He is a legitimate talent indeed.
Nice.
And similar, I'm sure if you are a longtime listener here at Movies You Miss podcast, you know that I do not like to break, so to speak, the fourth wall when it comes to Christopher Nolan movies. I had to do it with Memento and Tenet, and I had to do it with my most favorite film, directed by Christopher Nolan, this film, Interstellar. It was a bit of a heartbreaking moment, but also a incredibly emotional 4.5 hours because the behind the scenes of making of Interstellar changed my life even more.
That must be such a catch-22 for you because you love Christopher Nolan so much, you want to tell our audience about all of his movies, but it makes it so you have to go behind the scenes of those films that you love so much.
You are exactly right. I remember telling you that, especially with Tenet, because I had never watched the Tenet special features, and I have been watching Interstellar for the last 10 years, and I have the Blu-ray. I never once watched any of the special features because I wanted to keep the illusion that this actually happened, that they went to space to shoot this fucking movie, that Matthew McConaughey passed his whole physicality to go through NASA, etc., etc. But, you know, again, it is a movie. It was shot on 70mm film and IMAX cameras. And the beautiful thing about the Blu-ray and the 4K 10-year anniversary edition, which I received from my parents for Christmas this past year.
Nice.
Absolutely incredible. And I'm very excited to break this movie down, not only in story for our audience that has not ever seen this movie. If you have not seen this movie, you need to do that as soon as possible. But the behind the scenes of this movie, absolutely incredible. And I will say, I saw this movie 5 times in theaters, 3 times at the ArcLight, once at the Arrow in Santa Monica off of Montana, with a Q&A with Christopher Nolan, and then a 5th time, my buddy Daniel Poor, who is a very big supporter of our podcast, and also the assistant to Michael Cosgrove, who was the producer of Young Frankenstein, he got me and Amy tickets to see Interstellar at the Film Preservation Society through the Academy Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences. So I was very fortunate to see a Q&A with Christopher Nolan after this movie, and right before the 5th time, listen to Christopher Nolan talk about the importance of film preservation, because as he was being honored that night as well. It was absolutely incredible because before Interstellar, we got a 4.5-minute trailer to Dunkirk because Dunkirk was just about to be released. So I'm a fanboy, as it were. I absolutely love the guy. I've read his books. I just got his other book this Christmas, Christopher Nolan and his movies. Absolutely love the guy. I cannot say anything bad about the guy. I literally am. I kind of am in love with the guy.
Well, the fact that you've been able to see this movie twice with Christopher Nolan is pretty awesome.
It really is. Yeah, it puts it into perspective too because we'll get into it. You know what? Let's just let me break this movie down as easily as I can without any spoilers because we do not spoil any movies here at Movies You Miss Podcast.
No, but Christopher Nolan movies are notorious for being hard to describe. So I wish you the best of luck. I know you will do it justice.
Thank you very much. I did a pretty good job with Memento and with Tenet. I hope I can do just as good a job with Interstellar.
Sure you can.
So Interstellar opens up with us meeting Cooper, played by Matthew McConaughey. He is woken up by a dream that he's having. His daughter, Murph, played by Mackenzie Foy. She is just a little bit worried about her father as to why he is rustling and bustling in his sleep. We find out that he was once a NASA pilot. He's also an engineer. And he is now a farmer. And this movie's set in the future, although we do not know exactly what time period this movie's set. I'm going to say this is several hundred years in the future.
Oh, no, I was thinking within the next, 80 years.
Okay, well, close enough to 100 years then.
Nah, I mean, I was being generous. I was actually thinking more like 50. I certainly think it's still in this century.
Okay, all right, see, that's interesting, because every time I watch it, I'm like, when do I think this movie's actually set? I'll give you that. I think in this century is feasible enough. There's definitely a lot of things that kind of allude to the fact that this may not be super futuristic, but at the same time...
Yeah, look at the truck he's still driving.
Right. Yeah, solid point. And that's kind of the fun thing about Tenet, too, is we don't really know what year this movie is set. And kind of with Inception as well. The technology and certain things that are on screen and that we're finding out about are really something of dreams and something of science fiction and something of that we actually cannot quite comprehend just yet. So Coop and his daughter Murph and his son Tom and his father-in-law Donald, played by John Lithgow, fantastically, by the way. John Lithgow is not in this movie for very long, but he's in it enough to do a fantastic job. And the cool thing about John Lithgow is he comes from comedy, right? We discussed him in Buckaroo Banzai. We've also talked about 30 Rock from the Sun. He's in the latest Conclave with Ray Fiennes. He's a very versatile actor. And the cool thing about Matthew McConaughey is he is also a very versatile actor. This movie came out several years after Dallas Buyers Club, which he won his first Oscar for, which is a great movie if you have not seen Dallas Buyers Club. But also, McConaughey kind of comes from that rom-com world. And other than that, of course, Dazed and Confused, which I believe is on V's list.
It is.
Which is kind of annoying, but that's okay.
Fair.
I love that movie so much, but hey, you deserve a Richard Linklater movie. I've done one or two of them by now. So anyway, let's get back to Interstellar. And like I said, Coop was a NASA pilot. He's now been forced to pretty much be a corn farmer because the world did not. Well, you know what? Why don't let's listen to this.
Come on, you're a well-educated man, Coop, and a trained pilot
and an engineer.
Okay, well, right now we don't need more engineers. We didn't run out of television screens and planes. We ran out of food. The world needs farmers. Good farmers like you and Tom.
Uneducated farmers.
We're a caretaker generation, Coop. And things are getting better. Maybe your grandkids will get to be engineers.
We done here, sir.
And that scene right there has never pissed me off more, I don't think, in any other fucking movie. And not because of what he says to Coop, but what Colette Wolfe's character says about the fact that Coop is now, just a little bit of context, Coop is now in a parent-teacher conference with Murph's teacher and principal of the school.
God, that scene pissed me off so much.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I'll never forget when I went and saw this movie with my dad, and I felt him tense up and heard him just take this big, deep breath. Because Colette Wolfe, and you just listen to this.
Miss Hanley's here to talk about Murph.
Murph is a great kid. She's really bright, but she's been having a little trouble lately. She brought this in to show the other students the section on the lunar landings.
Yeah, that's one of my old textbooks. She always loved the pictures.
It's an old federal textbook. We've replaced them with the corrected versions.
Corrected?
Explaining how the Apollo missions were fake to bankrupt the Soviet Union.
You don't believe we went to the moon?
I believe it was a brilliant piece of propaganda that the Soviets bankrupted themselves, pouring resources into rockets and other useless machines.
Useless machines.
And if we don't want a repeat of the excess and wastefulness of the 20th century, then we need to teach our kids about this planet, not tales of leaving it.
And the cool thing about this scene, as infuriating as it is the Blu-ray that I have that my wonderful wife gifted me for the first time. The first Blu-ray she ever bought me was Interstellar. It came with a 70mm clip from the reel of Interstellar, and it was Colette Wolfe telling Coop about how she believed that the moon landings were faked. And I was like, you know what? I was hoping for another one, but I love this one too, because this is so infuriating.
I have a friend who is open to the possibility of the moon landing being faked, and when we watched Fly Me to the Moon together, he was like, see, yeah, the moon landing could have been faked. And I turned to him, I'm like, I like you less. Like, I respect you less now. I cannot believe you're telling me this.
Right?
It pissed me off so much.
So fucking nuts. It's crazy. It really, yeah, that whole sequence was...
As big
the
fans of
acting is so
NASA,
fantastic.
don't ever say that to John and I. We'll just get
exactly
irate.
Yeah. 100%. And not only that, my grandfather worked on the Saturn rocket that took Apollo 11 to the moon, so pretty sure that we went to the moon. Anyway, beyond all of this, all of this stuff going on with Murph in school and the fact that Coop is now a farmer of corn, Murph believes that her bookcase is somehow involved in her life. A lot of her books keep falling off. She thinks that there's a ghost that keeps talking to her. And Coop is like, look, I don't believe your bookcase is trying to talk to you, but what is science? It's proving what you don't know, right? So if you can figure out a way that this bookcase of yours is actually explaining something to you or trying to get a message to you, figure that out and we'll go from there. And she's like, deal. Perfect. And I got to tell you, Mackenzie Foy, good Lord.
She's
incredible.
Great. And the only other time
Fantastic.
I've ever seen her is she plays Edward and Bella's daughter in the Twilight movies. The last Twilight movie, actually.
No way. Oh,
Yes.
my gosh.
Yes, that is one of the only ever times I've seen this young actress. And of course, in Twilight, she wasn't given that much to do, and so
Right.
you couldn't really see her talent. But in this movie, you sure as hell can. And this young woman
absolutely.
is very, very good.
I completely agree. The only other time I've ever seen her is in The Nutcracker in the Four Realms, which was a Disney-produced movie that my wife is a big fan of. I didn't like it very much, but, you know, it is what it is. We saw it at the El Capitan, and I was very stoned and thought the imagery was great. But I was like, oh, yeah, Mackenzie Foy, she's in Interstellar. I'll definitely see this movie. But anyway, going back to this whole thing with the bookcase, Murph finally figures out that there's a bit of a binary code here, and Coop also comes along for this ride and figures out that these are not just binary codes, they are coordinates for somewhere that he is going to go find. He decides to leave her behind, although she's not the type of person that's just gonna sit back and not be involved in this. She joins him for the ride. I love that sequence when he finds her in the truck. I think it's fantastic. They end up driving to locked gates of NORAD, and Coop ends up getting shocked. I will never forget that entire sequence in the theaters. You know, I've seen this movie so many times. It still is one of those jarring moments when the light turns on. It's like, step away from the gate. Like, that whole thing is great. So we end up finding out that Coop and Murph have now found the coordinates to NORAD and an underground bunker where NASA has been trying to relaunch a mission through a wormhole that they have discovered that showed up 48 years ago to another galaxy where there are potentially habitable planets for humans to fly to and start recreating and saving the human race and taking them off planet Earth that is currently dying. And for the rest of the movie, we are along for one of the most intense, emotional, scientific rides that you have ever been on in your life. And I wish a 4DX theater was created before this movie came out, because this would be an incredible 4DX experience. I, again, saw this movie 5 times, now 6 times in theaters. It will be re-released at the end of January for another IMAX go-around because it was so successful in December. I cannot say how much I love this movie. This movie touches me. It makes me cry every fucking time. V, this was your second rewatch. Be gentle. Tell me what you thought. I want to know. I have been dying to know for the last month and a fucking half how this movie made you feel. Let's hear it.
Okay, as we've said, I saw this movie in IMAX in 2014. I'm so glad I saw it in IMAX. And then this week, I sat down in front of my very nice TV. As a cinephile, like John and I have definitely invested in my TV and surround system. As all of you know, I waited until it was night, turned all the lights off. I made sure this was an experience. My computer, my phone was all put away. I took very few notes because I wanted to be fully invested in this movie. And it didn't hit me the way I thought it would.
Oh, no.
And I was so upset about it because I know how much you love this film and I didn't want to hurt your feelings and I know how much it means to you and I was so worried about this conversation. I don't hate it. It just didn't affect me the way I thought it would or the way it affected me the very first time I watched it, because when I saw it in IMAX in 2014, I sat for 10 minutes after the credits saying nothing with my two friends. Actually, it was my sister and her boyfriend at the time. And we were so touched by this film and thought it was so incredible and it just blew our minds. And so I was fully prepared to have my mind equally blown this time around 10 years later. And I'm watching this film going, this is just like most good sci-fi movies I've seen in the last 20 years. This isn't above and beyond better than several movies I could think of. I mean, I put it up there with Arrival, Children of Men. I think there are several Christopher Nolan movies better than Interstellar. I was so dismayed by my reaction, and I'm so sorry to tell you this, and I feel terrible, I swear. But it just didn't affect me the way I thought it would. And I don't know if it was because I've seen several movies with similar plot lines since then, and he was the one who started this. So like Christopher Nolan, all credit goes to Chris, but there have been several movies with plots like this since then. And so it's not as revolutionary to me now, rewatching it this week.
Okay.
And I think maybe that's part of the reason, because the whole conclusion of this movie is this big, I wouldn't say twist, but it's supposed to knock your socks off. And this time around, it just didn't. I was just like, yeah, okay, this was a good movie. It was well acted. The visual effects are great. Even 10 years later, they still totally hold up. All the performances were fantastic. It really reminded me that Matthew McConaughey is a fantastic, talented actor. I mean, he is believable as a dirtbag as he is an engineer and NASA pilot. Every moment of this movie, I believed him in this character, and I thought that was very impressive. But I can't think of the next time I would be wanting to sit down to watch this film.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the end of the podcast is here. That is it. Good night.
Yeah, I was worried about that.
Well, that does break my heart quite a bit, to be honest with you.
I know, and I'm so sorry. It's a good film. I just don't see it as spectacular anymore.
Wow. Well,
I think Inception's a better film.
Okay. Well, that's fine. The cool thing about Christopher Nolan is his movies are very divisive. Right? He came out with Memento, his first big movie, right? We discussed that one. Insomnia was next. Oh, so actually, this is my fourth because I've done Insomnia.
Oh, right.
So I've done Memento, Insomnia, Tenet, and now Interstellar.
I mean, I would argue my pick this week is a better film.
Oh, no. I don't agree with that one, and not because Interstellar's my pick and I love it so much, but I haven't watched your pick as often as I've watched Interstellar. And, again,
I mean,
look,
Dune 2?
The way,
I think I like Dune 2 better. I like Minority Report better. I need to stop
talking. Every opinion is valid.
I need to stop
Ladies and gentlemen, every opinion is valid. I am massaging my temples because I love my co-host so much.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know.
But I'm going to have nightmares about this conversation. No, it's okay. It's all good. This is not one of those movies that everybody, for whatever reason, and I am one of those people.
It's good. It just didn't blow my mind this time. And I don't know if it's because, similar to other movies.
You waited a long time, though.
I thought that would help.
But in a weird way, I feel like if you wait too long, sometime, and we've had this conversation before, it's I don't you told me the terminology for it. It's like if you wait too long and you think on a movie too much that you enjoyed the first time, but you don't enjoy several months later because you were thinking about it too much. It makes sense because you had too much time to think about it.
Right.
You had too much time to, and that's also kind of a weird thing to say too, because the science of this movie is pretty factual based off of
It
Kip
is.
Thorne's equation, and it's interesting. And again, that is the beauty. It really is the beauty of cinema. There are people out there that are on my side, right? That will
course.
literally
Oh,
say that this is
There are
Nolan's masterpiece.
countless people.
This is the movie.
There are countless people on social media that would be asking for my head if they listen to this
Yes.
episode.
100%. Yeah, and I'm curious what Gavin will have to say about this. Gavin and Nick and several of our Vince and our several other followers.
Steve.
Steve, Whiskey by the Fire. I'm curious what he thinks of Interstellar, and maybe he's never even seen it. That is the beauty of cinema. Is like there's so many different opinions, especially when it comes to another one of my most beloved movies. Like you loved Jurassic Park, you loved Spun.
Thank God.
You loved Tenet. Exactly, thank God. This could have ended a long time ago. And several other movies. And I've loved a lot of your movies, and I've liked majority of your movies, and that's fine. And I'm not saying you
right
didn't
back at
like
ya.
Interstellar. It didn't hit you the way that you thought it would. And again, totally fine. I don't know how it didn't, but it's okay. I don't know how many times over the last now almost 11 years that I've watched this movie and have just bawled my eyes out. Especially after they get off of man's planet and the whole redocking. No spoilers, but there's a redocking sequence in this movie that brings me to a blubbering mess. And after that, there's many other moments. You know what, V? You are Tars or Case in this movie. You need the green light that says when you're joking. You're joking right now. I think you're joking. You're ex-military. You're joking.
True, but my humor is rarely set at 90%. Like
exactly. Yes.
No, I will. Okay, I did cry. I think that docking scene I was thinking about it when it was happening. I'm like, this is my favorite scene of the whole movie right here.
Yeah,
this
is
docking
so
scene is
goddamn incredible.
amazing. Yes, I loved that scene. I cried during this movie. I'm not saying that I didn't get emotional during this movie. It just didn't impact me or hit me where I'm like, oh my God, as soon as the credits roll, right? I was like,
Interesting.
okay.
See,
that was
when
the film.
the credits roll, that is when there like a few minutes before the credits roll, there's a line that just murders me, and it has murdered me every single time I watch this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it made me cry.
There's a couple other lines after that, and then the cut.
See, I like the script before that.
Okay, I got you.
So
I got you.
There's a couple lines in the that I actually wrote down. Of the few notes I took, these are a couple of them. First of all, when Cooper is talking to his father-in-law, John Lithgow, who, by the way, love him as a dramatic actor. He's very good as a villain. He was great. Even though he has a crazy, ridiculous accent, he's great as the villain in Cliffhanger.
I haven't seen Cliffhanger.
Terrifying in Dexter.
I heard he's amazing in Dexter.
Yeah, he's a great actor. So Cooper is talking to him, and Cooper says, "We used to look up at the sky and wonder at our place in the stars. Now we just look down and worry about our place in the dirt." I was like, "Oh yes, that's such a good line." And
it's good.
Christopher Nolan and his brother. They write fantastic screenplays. No denying. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan. And
I know you are.
And I love when Coop meets Dr. Brand, who is played by Michael Caine, a very frequent collaborator with Christopher Nolan, which is great.
He's been in every Christopher Nolan movie since The Dark Knight.
I hope he makes
an
appearance.
Inception. He's in Tenet.
I know he's retiring, but I hope he makes an appearance in The Odyssey. That would be so cool.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
Even if it's one line, I don't care. But Dr. Brand, who is played by Michael Caine, is leading NASA at this point and asks Coop to be a pilot again.
Yeah.
I love this line because Coop says, "I've got kids, Professor." And Michael Caine's response is,
"I've got kids, Professor."
Get out there and save them.
Oh, that was so good. So good.
So good.
So, this is,
the cinematography
like I said,
in that scene is ridiculous.
This is a great film. It just didn't hit me in the feels. That's all.
Well, I think it did because you said you cried. So something wrong here. Something's wrong.
Disney movies, maybe. I cry easily in film. You know that. That's
Yes,
not a
I
great
do. Yes,
litmus
I know that,
test.
yeah.
And there is a conversation in this movie that I really like that I once had years ago with a couple of friends of mine about the nature of the universe. Whether or not our conversation centered around whether or not there is a moral compass of the universe. And my friend was arguing that, yes, there's morality to the universe. That's how we found morality. And I argued, no, the universe at its core, by its nature, has no morality because morality is completely subjective and it's made up by humans.
Yeah,
We
I will agree
create
with
morality.
yours, definitely.
Other species on this planet, they haven't created morality. They don't know what that is. And
Nope.
so there's a conversation in Interstellar that I really liked, and that's what reminded me of my real life conversation. And it was between Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway's character.
She also plays Dr. Brand.
She also plays Dr. Brand, which is why I didn't use her name, because then it's confusing.
Oh, okay. Well, she's the daughter of Michael Caine in this movie, so
is.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of them asks, you don't think nature can be evil?
Oh, I love that.
And it's a
moment,
great
too.
conversation.
Yeah.
That's what I love. You know, out there, we face great odds. Death, but not evil.
You don't think nature can be evil?
No. Formidable, frightening, but no, not evil. Was the lion evil because it rips a gazelle to shreds?
And I agree. I actually don't think nature can be evil. There are not inherently evil tendencies to nature. Nature can be cold, callous, indifferent.
Yeah.
But it's not evil. I go
It's
out in
not
nature.
evil.
I'll backpack in nature. Nature isn't out to get me.
No,
it won't
exactly.
save me, but it's certainly not out to get me.
Right.
I meet a random creepy
what she
guy on the
says,
trail. He might be out to get me, but nature is
absolutely.
not.
No, and I love that too. She goes, "Why is a lion evil because he tears a gazelle to shreds?"
Exactly.
You know, it's like, well, no, it's survival of the fittest.
It's
like-
nature.
and that is one of the cores of this movie too. It's literally almost survival of the fittest. You know,
It is.
Is the human race fit enough to survive?
Yeah.
And there's just so many things in this movie that literally are just like that make me think, and even my wife, like she's a big fan of this movie too, that make you think like, oh my gosh, could this happen? Not to jump too far ahead, but with your movie, the human race, right? Like your movie kind of just blurs the lines between not just people, but race of everybody.
Yeah, humanity.
You know, like how can? Thank you. Humanity is the word. I've used that word so many times in different movie conversations. This movie has a lot of humanity to it too, because
there are a lot of great moral questions in this movie.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing that I really like about this movie too. And I'm very heartbroken to hear what you have to say about your second viewing. It is what it is. It's okay. It's totally fine.
At the time I thought it was groundbreaking. Now I don't. I will sit down and watch it when you ask me to. Otherwise, I don't plan on watching it again.
Oh, good Lord.
I'm just making it worse. I'm digging myself
you really
a deeper
are.
hole. Get into the trivia. We need to move on.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of time left because we've had a great conversation about how wrong V is.
I know. I'm
but
sorry.
that's okay. This movie, where to begin with the behind the scenes? I do want to read the note that Christopher Nolan included with the 10-year anniversary 4K re-release. A note from Christopher Nolan. 10 years pass in the blink of an eye. 10 years since we tried to look into the future, since we tried to show that time and space could bend and warp in ways both logical and horrifically indifferent to our human needs. We peered into the vastness of space to explore the cruelty of time, but the joke was on us. Here on Earth, my kids grew just as fast as they do for Cooper, perched at the edge of a distant black hole. We're as confounded by the mutability of time as the crew of the Endurance, 10 years compressed into mere moments. But from within that blink of an eye, other things unfurl. Kip Thorne wins a Nobel Prize for his pioneering work on detecting gravity waves. The first image of a black hole appears on the front page of the New York Times, and to those of us who made Interstellar, it is the face of an old friend. New generations of filmgoers discover and connect with the film in ways we'd never foreseen. To paraphrase another great McConaughey performance, we get older, Interstellar stays the same age.
Oh, now I feel
Signed
like
by
an
Christopher
asshole.
Nolan himself. Yeah, you kind of fucking are. Yeah, it's okay. I love you. You're my asshole. Now, again, with Kip Thorne, for those of you that
That's so
do not
cool.
know who Kip Thorne is an astrophysicist at Caltech. California Institute of Technology. He and Jonathan Nolan spent 4 years discussing
shit.
the probability, discussing the probability of a black hole, time travel, theoretical science, and real science are in this movie. And that is another reason why this movie hits me so much. The first time I actually ended up seeing this movie in theaters was at the ArcLight the weekend that it was released. It was released November 7th in 2014. I went that Saturday, and I had a special ticket because being a member of the ArcLight Cinema meant that you got first choice of, trying to buy tickets to special screenings. And one of them was Interstellar on November 8th of 2014, which was a Saturday. And the cool thing about that screening was, after the movie, there was a scientist from the Griffith Observatory that was there to discuss wormholes and space travel. So not only was I involved in Interstellar, but I got to discuss space-time and wormholes with an actual Griffith Observatory scientist. And there was a cocktail hour after, and I remember asking about the equation that Kip Thorne had come up with based off of Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, and she had clarified that this is actually something that very potentially could happen at some point in our lifetime.
Very cool, and I'm not surprised. Christopher Nolan is like Robert Eggers, right? They are so about the authenticity, the realism for whatever story they're telling. I would expect nothing less.
Exactly, and it really was awesome. I remember chatting with the scientist, and just my mind was completely blown, and the theater was full, which is great because it's Hollywood, it's the ArcLight. How can you not fill that theater? And the cool thing was, this scientist was a big fan of the movie too, unlike you, V.
Fair.
I just had to throw that out there.
No, that's fair.
Now, this movie, the soundtrack is by Hans Zimmer. If you don't know that, this is an incredible soundtrack.
It is. I agree.
I absolutely love it. The soundtrack was recorded at a church in New York City. They actually ended up breaking up a lot of the strings and woodwinds and brass instruments, including that church organ, which was played by one man who had played a church organ for the last 40 years, and he absolutely killed this soundtrack.
I've seen the behind-the-scenes video of Hans Zimmer making this score. It's a lot of fun. It's very fascinating, and watching him put this score together it was a treat to watch for sure.
It really was. It's pretty incredible stuff. One thing I found very cool about the behind-the-scenes of this movie was that Christopher Nolan and Kip Thorne, now Kip Thorne being the astrophysicist from Caltech and Christopher Nolan being who he is, they were very reluctant to actually work together, even though Christopher Nolan wants to make things as realistic as possible. He was very afraid that Kip Thorne was going to do nothing but stomp all over his ideas, and Kip Thorne had the same mindset about Christopher Nolan, thinking that maybe he would stomp all over the actuality of the science and the equations and all this stuff going into making Interstellar. But they ended up spending so much time together that they developed a very, very fantastic friendship, and ended up making sure that everything worked out as close to actual science as possible. And there's a great 5-minute moment in the making of this movie where Christopher Nolan and Kip Thorne are in Christopher Nolan's office, and all they're doing is yelling at each other but laughing at the same time, because you can tell that they both want to make something fantastic. And not only does Christopher Nolan want to do that, but Kip Thorne has never been involved in a Hollywood movie before, and he wants to make sure that he's being respected, and he wants to respect the vision that Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan have. And up until this day, especially when, in the note that Christopher Nolan wrote about the fact that a black hole had shown up on the New York Times, I'll never forget that day. My mom sent me the image of the New York Times with that black hole on it, and I will never forget being like, well, that's Gargantua. And it literally is as accurate as it can be, and that's why I need it tattooed on me somewhere, because it is one of the most authentic, accurate portrayals of a black hole that has ever been put on screen. Another cool thing about this movie is that the dust bowls that are happening in this movie are based off of Ken Burns' documentaries about the Dust Bowl back in the 1930s.
Nice.
And Christopher Nolan had watched all those along with his brother Jonathan Nolan. And I actually want to see those, because not only are those documentaries of something that actually happened, the real magnificent part about Interstellar is that this is something, not only the stuff in space, but the stuff on planet Earth kind of has already happened in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, and anytime you have an excuse to watch a Ken Burns documentary, I highly recommend it.
That's all I've heard.
Yeah.
The spacesuits that McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, Wes Bentley, and David Gyasi were wearing all were between 30 and 35 pounds. They all included air tubes and water tubes. So if you're actually watching this movie when they're underwater at all, which only happens a few times in the movie, they actually do have tubes that actually pump air into them, and they ended up using live microphones while they were wearing these suits to actually record the dialogue. So none of this is ADR. This is all actually happening on set on the day, which is pretty badass.
Which is the opposite of my movie.
Oh, well, all right then. See, Interstellar's better. Now, the Ranger and the Endurance all were built on sound stages. There were miniatures also built, but there were interiors of the Endurance and the Ranger built on sound stages. And the gimbals that they were put on, Christopher Nolan actually piloted himself.
You know what? That is something I would do as a director. Get the coolest job possible. Yep, yeah, I'm going to play this one.
100%.
All I could think of was the Endurance documentary when I was watching this film the other day.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's such a great documentary. I'm so glad that we were able to both watch that, and you told me to watch it.
Yep.
The Endurance interiors were built on sound stages, like I just mentioned, on hydraulic sets, 160 feet long on sound stages at Culver Studios at Sony. I can only imagine I've been on those sound stages.
Yeah, for sure.
The sequence where they're landing on Miller's planet on the water, where Brand is like stuff of life when he actually like cuts it and lands on that rig, 14,000 pounds, fully hydraulic. All of it is practical. None of it is digital. The production of Interstellar began on March 8th of 2013. They wrapped on August 9th of 2013.
Yeah, I could see it taking that long.
Yes. Post-production was December 9th of 2013 all the way through July 1st of 2014. They locked picture on September 14th. This movie has 700 visual effects shots, which is the most of most Christopher Nolan films, if you think about it.
Yeah, I would expect this to have the most visual effects shots of any Christopher Nolan film.
Yeah, definitely. They had a zero-gravity consultant, the retired NASA astronaut Marcia Ivins. She was the pilot of the Atlantis space shuttle.
Ooh, cool.
She was on set quite a bit. And another cool thing about this movie was they projected a lot of the images on a screen outside of the practical effects. So a lot of this movie is actually not CGI. It is what they were actually looking at, especially when it came to the black hole. The movie was limitedly released on November 5th of 2014, worldwide release November 7th of 2014. It had a $165 million budget.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all.
Neither am I. It came in at domestically $203.2 million, and worldwide came in at $743 million. The highest grossing film of 2014 was Transformers: Age of Extinction. Number 3 was Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 6, one of our favorite films, which I actually just watched the other night, X-Men: Days of Future Past.
Nice.
Number 9, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And the 10th highest grossing film of 2014, my pick for this week, Interstellar, coming in at $681 million. So that is Interstellar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. V is incorrect about their opinion, and I can't wait to save Matt Damon again. V, take it away.
Yes, let's. This movie actually came into my life starting off by me reading the book, because this is actually a book first. Andy Weir wrote The Martian. Absolutely fell in love with this book and was so excited for the movie that was coming out. If you have not read the book yet, John, you need to borrow my copy because it's awesome.
Okay. I have not read the book. It's definitely a book that I want to read, but I've seen the movie so many times now.
There's a lot of science behind it that I really loved. There's actually a couple other things that happened on Mars to Mark Watney that I enjoyed as well. Highly recommend the book. I love this movie, but the book is even better. It's amazing.
All right.
Highly recommend.
Sweet.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't put it all together yet, no worries. I picked the 2015 sci-fi film, The Martian.
Yeah.
And given this is about a man stranded on Mars, you think that I would not talk that much about the cast, but this is an incredibly stacked cast. All the people who are the astronauts and who are on Mars, as well as all the people back home on Earth at NASA and JPL. Every single one of these people you will recognize. I'm excited to go through this cast because they're all great in their own right. Oh my God, I love this movie. And every time I watch it, I'm reminded of how much I love this movie. I sometimes forget because it's not a film I often bring up during conversation when I talk about my favorite sci-fi films, even though it is one of them.
Oh, all right.
So I'm very excited to talk about it today. I'm excited to talk about it alongside one of your favorite or your all-time favorite sci-fi films. And
Yes.
I already know you love the film, so you can't shit on it just to get back at me.
No, I can't.
So instead, I'll just talk about The Martian and the plot and go from there.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so The Martian starts out actually on Mars. So we've picked up where the planet Earth and NASA specifically has already sent a successful mission to explore Mars. And I really like that because so many times these kinds of stories are about how do we get to Mars and the success of getting there. And this movie is, no, we've gotten there. We're there. And so we open up on Mars with a crew of NASA astronauts. Matt Damon plays Mark Watney. We know Matt Damon very well, and we've actually picked a couple of movies of his on this podcast as well. I'm just going to mention a couple of his more underrated performances.
Yes.
He was great in Courage Under Fire, a Denzel movie.
I've never seen it.
What?
Meg Ryan's in that movie.
Yeah, how do you claim to be a Denzel fan? It's a really good film.
Never saw it.
Oh, I've seen it multiple times. It's great.
All right.
He also stars in The Rainmaker with Danny DeVito. A movie
Never saw it.
A movie based on a John Grisham novel. Very good. It's about our healthcare system.
Oh, okay.
So it's very relevant.
The name was always something that threw me off.
Yeah, it's not a good name. It's not a good name.
Because, the Rain Man, Rainmaker,
Yeah,
they came
exactly.
out around the same time. It's like, what are these movies about?
Yeah. And Matt Damon's also in Dogma.
Yes, he is.
He has one of my all-time favorite Actually, this man, along with Alan Tudyk, has some of my all-time favorite cameos in general. He has a cameo in Eurotrip. He has a cameo in Thor Ragnarok, playing Loki.
Yeah, that was great.
Also has a cameo with Alan Tudyk in Deadpool 2.
That's right, yes.
He's also in The Adjustment Bureau that I think one of us are going to pick at some point, right?
I feel like you might. I've seen it a few times. I like it, but it's not something that I'm going to be like, that's going to be on my list.
Yeah, I really like it. It's just one of those movies that you like but kind of forget about.
Yeah, it's a forgettable good movie.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe at some point when we're talking more about Emily Blunt, I'll put it on the list. And then Matt Damon also appeared in two of your picks because he's in Ford vs. Ferrari and The Brothers Grimm.
Yes.
The other NASA astronauts are Jessica Chastain, which you didn't talk about much for Interstellar.
At all.
At all, actually.
Nope, I did not.
But she's also in my film, which is rather fortuitous because one of our biggest fans, Morgan, recently texted me a couple weeks ago asking if we could talk about a Jessica Chastain movie because she thinks that Jessica is a very good actress. I agree.
I completely agree.
We just happened to pick two Matt Damon movies that also starred Jessica Chastain.
I didn't get into it because there was so much to get into with
I
Interstellar.
know, it's pure accident, but she's great in both films.
She's great in both films. For our listeners, she plays older Murph in Interstellar.
Yes, she does. And Jessica Chastain in my movie plays Captain Lewis. She is the captain of the ship that goes to Mars, the Ares mission. And she's also in The Help, Zero Dark 30, Miss Sloane, and a future pick of mine, probably Molly's Game.
Oh, I never saw Molly's Game.
Oh, it's good.
I was not a big Zero Dark 30 fan. I thought that was a very underwhelming movie.
Yeah, me too.
And I like Jessica Chastain quite a bit.
Same.
She's
and
a beaut.
She is. And Kate Mara is another member of the crew. She plays Johansson.
Yeah.
She is good at playing a widow because she's in Shooter and in We Are Marshall, a Matthew McConaughey film.
I haven't seen either of those movies.
Oh my God, they're both good. It's a bummer.
All right.
Kate Mara is also the granddaughter of the owner of the New York Jets. And her sister Rooney Mara is the one who starred in the American version by David Fincher of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
That's right. And she's also in The Social Network.
She has such a good line. Oh God, the beginning of that film is so good. It's
know.
just because you're an asshole.
You're an asshole. So good. So good.
So accurate, too. Sebastian Stan plays Beck. He is Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier in all of the MCU.
Yes.
I first noticed him back in one of his very early credits in the show Once Upon a Time. He played the Mad Hatter for a couple episodes, and man,
cool.
When I saw him, I was like, this guy's good. This guy really grabbed my attention. So I'm glad he's gone on and had a good career, and he was great in this film.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I've seen The Martian many times. I think I total maybe 6 or 7.
Okay.
And I always know that Michael Pena's in it,
Of
Jessica
course.
Chastain, Jeff Daniels, Kristen Wiig. Sorry, I'm like kind of jumping on your
fine, no worries.
thing. But I always forget that it's Sebastian Stan and Kate Mara.
Yeah, well, that's because I think they're a lot more subdued. I mean, Jessica Chastain and Michael Pena absolutely steal the show on that ship. right?
Definitely.
I mean,
Yeah.
they are really impactful. They have really great lines. And I think that works, though, because you can't all be rock stars, right?
Absolutely.
And so Michael Pena being the pilot on the Ares mission, playing Martinez, he's fantastic. The banter between him and Matt Damon is great as well. And Michael Pena, for those of you who don't recognize his name, he is fantastic in the Ant-Man movies. He's the good friend who's always telling the stories in the little montage plays. He's so good. And
I like Michael Pena.
I
I've
love him.
always enjoyed him quite a bit.
Me too. And he's actually in a future pick of mine that's coming up soon, I think. He is in the World War II movie Fury.
Yes.
He's also in Gangster Squad and another I think that might be a pick of ours too. And End of Watch with Jake Gyllenhaal.
Oh my God, End of Watch. Oh my God.
So good.
I actually just watched Gangster Squad again the other night, and that movie is awesome.
Yeah, I think we should pair it with LA Confidential because it takes place at the same time in the same place.
Okay. And I hated LA Confidential.
I know.
So I think we know where the choices are going to go then.
Yeah. And I think you're due a moment of trying to bury me in one of my picks, given how heartbroken you are today.
It's been a very long time.
It has. Well,
it's
that's
time
good.
to shut you down.
I've got good taste. What can I say? And Michael Pena is actually also in Shooter, which is cool.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I haven't seen that one either.
So that makes
He's great in Observe and Report.
And that makes up the crew of the Ares space mission that has gone to Mars. They are currently all doing their jobs on Mars. Mark Watney, played by Matt Damon, is actually the botanist, and he's collecting soil samples. And each of them, like I said, are doing different tasks as they should. The problem is that a major storm kicks up. And this storm gets worse and worse on Mars to a point where they have a limit on how bad the wind can be before they have to abandon their mission because the wind will knock over their exit vehicle, the spacecraft that is going to launch them off of Mars and back to their main station that's orbiting Mars right now. The wind does, in fact, get worse to a point where visibility is almost impossible. Everything's blacked out. There's rocks and dirt and all sorts of crap blowing through the air. And they leave their habitat, and as a crew, they try to walk towards their spacecraft. While they're trying to make it there, Mark Watney gets hit with a giant piece of debris and gets launched because Mars gravity is less than Earth's. And unfortunately, there are no readings. His biomonitor says that he's dead. He's not responding on the radio. And unfortunately, they are out of time. So Captain Lewis, played by Jessica Chastain, makes the horrible and difficult decision to leave Mark Watney behind because she has to save the rest of her crew. And that's exactly what happens.
Ugh, I'll never forget seeing this in the theaters for the first time. I was like, God damn, what a tough choice to make.
Yeah.
Because a lot of movies don't really go there. You know,
Right.
like there's a lot of movies that are just like, no,
we're not going to leave him, and it all works out.
Leave no man behind. You know, it's kind of like going back to like Black Hawk Down. Nothing against Black Hawk Down. It's one of my favorite war movies, but it's like leave no man behind. But at the same time, if you're in a unforgivable territory like space and Mars, you're just kind of like, get the fuck out of there. Fuck it. As much as I want Matt Damon to live.
Yeah, it's like we got to make these hard calls and try to save who we can, right? And they do. And so they are now back on the main Ares spaceship, and it is heading back to Earth. It's going to take several months, and they are all very heartbroken that they lost their friend. I mean, they've been traveling for months and months and months together. They trained, of course, for even longer than that, I'm sure, before this mission even got off the ground. They are mourning the way you would any lost friend.
Right.
And now, back on Earth, NASA has to announce that they've lost an astronaut. And that's what they do. Jeff Daniels plays Teddy Saunders, the head of NASA. I love Jeff Daniels in dramatic roles so much. I know he's famous for Dumb and Dumber, but goddamn is he good in dramatic roles, just like John Lithgow.
He's so good in dramatic roles.
He was great in Speed, my pick for episode 117. In Looper, another one of my former picks.
So good. He's a beast.
He is.
When he wants to be, he's so good.
He's so
And I'll never forget, like, watching so many interviews with him about his agent and management team telling him that he's throwing his career away with accepting Dumb and Dumber, and he knew that he was taking a chance. Now, granted, Dumb and Dumber 2 is garbage.
Yes.
Dumb and Dumber is literally,
hilarious.
in my personal opinion, one of the greatest comedies of all time. And not because of Jim Carrey, but because of Jeff Daniels also.
Yes.
They're so good together. They play off each other so well. And he is a great actor. And that's the beauty of an actor, right? You can do... And he
That's the
came
beauty
from
of a good
dramatic
actor.
role.
a good actor.
Good actor. Yes, absolutely.
And he is also in a good Disney live-action remake, 101 Dalmatians.
Yes, he is.
But my all-time favorite role of his and my all-time favorite scene, one of my all-time favorite monologues actually, is the first episode of The Newsroom. I know I've mentioned this before on this podcast. It is worth mentioning again. Please look up that monologue on YouTube, especially with current times. It is so well written. It is so well delivered by Jeff Daniels. Highly recommend it. Vincent Kapoor, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, who is the director of all the Ares missions, those missions that are going to Mars.
Yeah.
He works closely with Teddy Saunders. Chiwetel, we love him on this show. We've actually picked him way more times than I even realized. One of his earlier credits is in Love Actually. He plays the husband, Keira Knightley's husband, who the poor guy gets totally betrayed by his stupid friend who holds up those dumbass signs. God, I hate that movie so much.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's...
It shows you how much I remember that movie. I don't even remember that part.
You're lucky.
I mean, I remember that whole moment with the signs and stuff, but I don't remember that he's in that movie.
No, he plays the husband. But I can tell you that where I first noticed him and where I was blown away by his acting and hoping I would see him again for many years in the future, and I'm glad I have, he was in the short-lived Joss Whedon show Firefly, got a movie to conclude the whole storyline after the show got canceled. This movie is called Serenity, and he plays a government assassin, and he is so cold in that movie. Oh my God. He is so incredible in that film.
I've heard Serenity is great. My wife has told me to watch it, and I haven't seen any
The problem is you'd have to watch Firefly first. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He actually was in an entire episode of ours because in episode 18, he was in both Inside Man, which was my pick, and Children of Men, which was your pick.
Yes. I was going to say, we've talked about him a couple of times here.
Maybe better than Interstellar. He's also in your pick for episode 106. He's in American Gangster.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
He stars in 12 Years a Slave, and he was also in the first Doctor Strange movie. He plays Mordo. He's basically the second in command to Tilda Swinton's character. And goddamn, they wasted him in Doctor Strange 2. I'm so disappointed.
Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah. It's not good.
That's how I feel about it.
Same. But Chiwetel will be on in the future in this podcast because I think I'm going to pick The Old Guard. It's such a good Charlize Theron movie. I think it's really underrated. I know it's a Netflix movie. I know you hate Netflix, but it's a really good film.
Yeah.
I like it. And Mitch Henderson is played by Sean Bean. He is responsible for the astronauts, and he manages them. He's kind of like their personal liaison. And really...
I'm going to say this right now. I love Sean Bean. I haven't read the book. But do they really reference the Lord of the Rings in the book, too? Because there's that moment in the movie where it's like, this is the moment where they're talking about the ring.
It is, in fact, referenced in the book.
Okay, alrighty. When I saw, and I think this was the fourth or fifth time that I saw The Martian. I have the 4K of this movie. Mm-hmm. I saw it once in theaters, and every other time after that, it's been at home.
Same.
And when they mentioned the whole thing about Frodo and Sam and Gandalf, and I'm like, is this a
is it too much breaking the fourth wall?
Is this a moment where Ridley Scott was like, it'd be great if, like,
please
all of a sudden,
don't ever do a British accent ever again. I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah, that was my terrible Irish, British, whatever the fuck.
Dick Van Dyke
really
called.
bad.
He wants his accent back.
Oh, I love Dick Van Dyke. Happy 99th birthday, Dick Van Dyke. Glad your house is safe. I thought it was
it
funny.
too meta for you, or did you like it?
No. I didn't think it was too meta. I just thought it was kind of like, but why?
No, it was in the book. Because they're all nerds. Because they're all giant nerds.
I get it.
Okay.
I get it. I totally get it. I understand. But I'm when I'm watching it this time around, because you and I have just not even on the podcast, just talked about that whole sequence in Lord of the Rings with Sean Bean, because we talked about Sean Bean during Ronin, and it's like, when has he not been a little bitch? He's definitely not a bitch in The Martian.
No.
But otherwise, Boromir, Ronin, he's definitely been a bitch.
Game of Thrones.
Well, not so much a bitch in Game of Thrones.
I
but
cannot wait to remind you of GoldenEye then.
Oh, well, again, I haven't seen GoldenEye in many years.
So excited.
It's still just one of those things like, okay. Did they cast Sean Bean on purpose?
I think so.
Was there nobody else? And nothing against Sean Bean. I love the guy. But it's like, okay. I don't know. I just thought it was funny.
I just think, and I'm going to spoil this just because I have to. But spoiler alert, this is one of the few films I've ever seen that Sean Bean doesn't die.
That's true. That's very true.
It's actually not spoiling the movie by saying that.
That is very, very true.
So now these guys back at NASA have the unfortunate task of alerting the public and the world that Mark Watney has died and they've left his body on Mars, and the Ares mission has been scrapped, cut short, and the rest of the crew is headed back to Earth. Now things move on. It's been about a month, and Vincent Kapoor, like I said, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, since he's directing the Ares missions, he is ready to start scanning Mars for planning out their next mission because there's more of them to come. And when he asks that, he asks if they can just scan the Ares 3 site to see how things are going there. And initially, Teddy Saunders is like, look, we can't do this because NASA is a government-funded agency. This is a public domain. If we show Mark Watney's body on screen, they're going to rebel against us. And Vincent says, no, we have to look, we have to check on things, and this is the time to do it. Well, when they do, they notice that several elements about the Ares 3 site have changed.
Just a little bit.
Including the giant rover. It has been moved several times.
Yes.
And who could have possibly done that? Well, certainly not aliens, because they're not on Mars, unfortunately. Instead, NASA starts theorizing that maybe Mark Watney survived. Now, this is where we pick up Mark Watney, and it is so fun. And I can't believe I'm saying that because this is about a man abandoned on an alien planet, but this movie is hilarious. The lines in this movie are so funny. I laugh throughout this entire film. Matt Damon is incredible. I don't know who else could have carried this film because more than half of this film is just him.
Yeah, it's almost a one-man show movie.
It is.
Which is crazy to kind of say because when I was watching it this time, I saw this movie in theaters. I actually saw this movie a week after I was released from the hospital after being sent to the hospital on a TV show that I was working on.
Oof.
And I kept calling my mom, and she wouldn't answer the phone. And she ended up calling me back. It was like, oh, we're in the Martian. I'm like, why did you leave the movies to answer my fucking phone call? Go back to the movie. I'm fine. I just wanted to let you know I'm in the hospital. Go back to the movies. So a week later, my wife and I and my parents went to a theater called the iPic on Wilshire Boulevard in downtown Westwood and watched this movie. I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. My wife loved it too. After that, I've watched it at least 3 or 4 different times. I have the 4K digital copy. A buddy of mine gave me his digital code after he bought the 4K physical release. So I have it on my Fandango app. And there's a lot of BTS that I did not watch because I wanted you to tell me about the BTS.
Oh,
but it's a great movie. It's a lot of fun. And I remember when it won Best Musical or Comedy at the Golden Globes, and Ridley Scott was like, "This movie's not really a comedy," and I'm like,
"It kind of is."
Oddly enough, it is very funny.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can see why it's not perceived as a comedy because it's, scientific, it's space. You have something to say about that.
I can tell you there's some controversy about that.
Okay.
It was accepted into the category, as you said, of comedy or musical, and won. And it won Best Actor in a Comedy or Musical for Matt Damon.
Right, yes.
But many filmmakers, including Judd Apatow, he criticized the Hollywood Foreign Press decision to submit the Martian, or allow the Martian to be submitted as a comedy, because it's a way to not face strong competition in the Best Drama category. Now, because of that, those types of complaints, it led to a rule change in the Golden Globes itself that dramas with comedic overtones cannot be entered as comedies. They must be entered as dramas.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
Now, if only they can extend that rule over to TV so The Bear can stop winning for comedy, that would be great.
Oh, my God. Can we stop with the love for The Bear?
Oh, God. So now we have Mark Watney on Mars, and we see that what happened is this piece of debris that knocked Mark Watney off his path and into the dark unknown during the storm, it actually is a little piece of metal tube that shot right into his biomonitor, which is why all of the screens went dark and why the crew thought he was dead. And so he drags himself back to the hub, was what they call it. It's their little habitat that they created on Mars. And we watch him perform his own surgery surgery to fix himself.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
I
my gosh.
love because this is the first word he says after the accident. It's been multiple minutes in the film. It's silent, and we're just watching it happen. And he fixes himself, and he leans back, and he goes, fuck.
Yeah. So good.
And it's so good because we know that's exactly what you should say when you realize you've been abandoned on a planet.
Definitely.
But what happens is Mark gets up. He basically dusts himself off, as it were. And he says, I'm not going to die here. And it reminded me, remember the film Unbroken, directed by Angelina Jolie?
I never saw it.
Oh, it's actually really good. It's a true story about Louis Zamperini, who was a POW in World War II under the Japanese. And a book was written about him, and then it turned into a movie. And during interviews of how he survived all this horrific treatment during the war, he said it was all about attitude. If you kept a positive attitude, you were the one who survived. He would see all these POWs coming through the camp, and he knew which ones were going to make it. And it was always the ones who had a positive attitude, who had some faith in being able to survive this. The Martian really reminds me of that because Mark Watney immediately has a can-do attitude. There's one problem, he's going to fix it. There's the next problem, he's going to fix that. And he just keeps going. And that is so important. I love the message of this movie. And I think that's why I keep coming back to it, because it's all about perseverance.
Oh, yeah.
And he does it in such a fun, witty way. I mean, he's talking about being a botanist and how he has to...
In the face of overwhelming odds, I'm left with only one option. I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
The main problem for him staying on Mars is that he's going to run out of food. He doesn't have enough. And he's going to, quote, use his botany powers to grow something on Mars so he can survive. And that's how he grows potatoes.
And yeah, that was so good.
So good. And now we're back on Earth. There's a flurry of conversations happening because, oh my God, Mark Watney is actually alive. And this is where we get Kristen Wiig's character. She plays Annie Montrose, who's the public relations officer or manager for NASA. And she was in my first ever pick of the show because she's in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Oh, yes, she is.
She also was on SNL for many, many years, and Ghostbusters, the all-female version, as well as Bridesmaids.
Yeah.
And I love what she says to Vincent Kapoor and Teddy Saunders about this situation.
I'm sorry, but you have not thought this through. I mean, what are we going to say? Dear America, remember that astronaut we killed and had a really nice funeral for? Turns out he's alive, and we left him on Mars. Our bad. Sincerely, NASA.
Yeah, that was good.
So now it's all about how do we make contact with Mark? There's no radio to just call him up on the hub. How are we going to get talking with him so we can tell him we know he's alive and start working with him on how to get him to survive long enough for us to send something out there to save him? Because this is the biggest problem. It takes months to get out to Mars after you spend a year building something to get to Mars.
Exactly.
And it's all about saving Mark Watney, and that is what the rest of this movie consists of. There are some fantastic solutions that people come up with. I love the involvement from all the different characters trying to save Mark Watney. Donald Glover comes into play. He plays an astrophysicist named Rich Purnell. I love his character.
Yeah, his character's great.
Donald Glover starred in Community. He's also the rapper Childish Gambino. His music video, This Is America, I think is one of the best music videos ever made. He also starred in Atlanta, and he played young Lando Calrissian in the Solo movie.
That's right, he did.
We also get Benedict Wong. He works for JPL. He helps design probes and things that are sent to Mars. Speaking of Doctor Strange, he plays Wong in the Doctor Strange movies and other MCU movies.
Oh, shit, that's right. He is in the Doctor Strange movies.
Yep.
Oh, my gosh.
And he's
in my future pick of Danny Boyle's Sunshine coming up in a few months.
Oh, okay. He is also in one of my most hated sci-fi movies, if not the most hated sci-fi movie of all time, Prometheus.
Oh, really? Is he in Prometheus?
I don't remember in Prometheus, but I've only seen that movie twice. I hated it both times.
Yeah.
So I try to block it
I
from
don't
my
remember
memory.
him in that movie.
Why waste gray matter on that one? And and the rest of this movie, just like the beginning, is full of witty dialogue, smart, intelligent dialogue as well. And I love that Teddy Saunders plays, I don't want to say the villain in this movie, he plays a little bit of a roadblock in this movie. I love how they portray the politics of NASA and being in the public eye as well, because they could have very easily made Teddy Saunders a caricature of a villain. And he's a bad guy because he needs to be a bad guy because the movie needs an antagonist. And they didn't do that here. And I love that because it would have been so cliche. Instead, you understand what Teddy is saying the entire time. Whenever he pushes back and says, look, this is going to make us look horrible, and then we're going to lose funding and we can't do future missions. You're like, yeah, I get what you're saying. It's not he's being ridiculous. He's not being cold-hearted. He's being pragmatic about the situation. And that is one of the things that I really credit the screenwriter Drew Goddard for doing, is that he didn't make some stereotypical villain because the movie, quote-unquote, needed one. It didn't. The antagonist is Mars.
I agree. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no need for a human. There's no need for a human antagonist in this movie.
Exactly.
It's time. It's the souls.
And another reason I love this movie is because anytime humanity can come together for a greater good, it gets me right in the feels. I just love the collaboration that's shown in this film, that everybody's working together. And it has a great soundtrack. It's full of disco music because Captain Lewis brought all disco songs in her box to Mars, and that's all that Mark Watney has to listen to, unfortunately. And so this movie is chock full of 70s classics, including David Bowie.
It's just fascinating that this movie gets you in the feels because of everything that you just listed, because everything you just listed is literally in my pick this week, except for the disco music.
Kind of, yes.
Yeah, you have nowhere to go with that one.
No, I do. I just don't want to shit on your movie even more than I have. Because there are a lot more elements to it, and there's a little bit more nefariousness to your movie.
All right, well, let's see what our audience thinks.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what movie our audience prefers, The Martian or Interstellar. Please let us know.
That is actually a very good point. Yeah, I'm curious. All of you, let us know.
Yes, let us know, and I'll continue talking about how much I love The Martian, including the score, because...
Yeah, Martian is a great movie.
Oh, thank you. It is. And before I get into some of the trivia and also who wrote and directed this film, and tell me what you thought about your recent revisit.
Well, like I said, the first time I saw this movie was in theaters, and after that, I did nothing but watch it at home. I love this movie. I have no qualms with it at all. I think it is hysterical. I think it's fantastic. The soundtrack is great. I'm not a big ABBA fan, but I do like how it's incorporated in the movie. I love the science of the movie. I love Jeff Daniels, Kristen Wiig, Donald Glover. I think everybody is really bringing it for this movie. It's a great time. It is 2.5 hours long. I did watch the extended cut, but I'll be honest with you, this was the first time that I watched the extended cut, so
the
I
biggest
don't know.
Regret of Ridley Scott's professional career.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Well, I'll be honest. I don't know what was extended and what was not from the PG-13 version.
Yeah.
I did enjoy it, though. I really liked the movie, and it's definitely a revisitable movie. I think Matt Damon's great. I love when everybody finds out that he's alive. I love the whole, coming together, the whole humanity, the whole sacrificial aspect of all of that is great. I would say, like if I were on a grading scale, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I really like it. It's a great movie. Yeah, it really is. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if I'd read the book because of how many times I've seen the movie, but that doesn't mean I never would read the book. So I am interested in having it in my collection to maybe one day jump into and give a read. But as a movie, great fucking time.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. And I can tell you one thing to encourage you to read the book. There is a point in the movie where something goes horribly wrong, right?
Yes.
The book explains precisely why that went wrong in such a fantastic way that the movie doesn't have time to explain.
All right.
That in and of itself, I think, is worth reading the book for.
All right. Well, that works for me.
And getting back to Mark Watney, space pirate is what he calls himself at one point in the movie, which is great.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why this movie is so good, like we said, is the screenplay. And it's based on a book by Andy Weir, but Drew Goddard was the one who adapted this to a screenplay. He's written episodes for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, Alias, Lost.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he also wrote screenplays to The Cabin in the Woods, which I know you love.
I love Cabin in the Woods.
World War Z, Bad Times at El Royale.
Oh, nice. That's a good movie.
And he also wrote and created the Daredevil series, which is very good. And Ridley Scott directed this film.
Yes, he most certainly did.
As we've alluded to several times already, Ridley Scott, I've picked him before because in episode 28, I picked Alien.
Hell yeah, you did.
And did you catch the Alien reference in this movie?
Oh, fuck yeah, I did.
Okay, great. Because as Beck is about to take a trip outside, Beth tells him to be careful because in space, and then she trails off. It's an unfinished quote, of course, from the famous tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream."
No one can hear you scream. Yeah. Fuck yeah.
From Alien.
I actually caught it this time around the first
good.
time. I don't think I caught it before. As much of an Alien fan as I am, this was the time I was like,
Yeah. No, it's subtle. I like it. They're not hitting you over the head with it, which is good.
Right.
Ridley Scott has directed some fantastic films. Beyond Alien, he also directed Blade Runner, Legend, a Tom Cruise movie that is going to be on the list at some point, Thelma and Louise, G.I. Jane, a movie you still need to watch,
I do.
Gladiator, which you didn't like, which is fine,
I did not like it.
Black Hawk Down,
One of my picks many episodes ago.
American Gangster, another pick of yours,
Another pick of mine, yes.
Kingdom of Heaven, and The Last Duel. However...
Oh, The Last Duel.
Speaking of Matt Damon. However, Ridley Scott has also made some horrendous films.
That is absolutely true.
Almost to a point of just washing away his previous good films. I cannot articulate how disappointing his recent films have been.
His filmography is very, very
all over the place.
Miss.
Yeah, because
it is.
Ridley Scott has also directed Hannibal, Robin Hood, Prometheus, Exodus, Gods and Kings, Alien Covenant, House of Gucci, Napoleon, and Gladiator 2. Good God!
I did not hate House of Gucci. I actually liked that movie quite a bit.
That movie is fucking terrible. So much so,
but it's also
that I watched it for a second time and only made it 30 minutes in before I turned it off. And you know how rarely I turn off films.
Yeah, I know. I watched it twice within 24 hours. I actually liked House of Gucci quite a bit.
Casting Jared Leto
I'm in the minority
in that role, putting him in a fat suit and that horrendous accent is unforgivable.
I know. Yeah. I just love the scene where it's him, Adam Driver, and Gaga, and he's like, "You stomped on my heart in the street," and she's like, "Well, you were." I don't know. I love that scene. There's a lot that's good in House of Gucci, but there's a lot that's bad too. I know.
Wasting my time. I can talk about the
but
Martian
you know what?
instead.
You wasted my time when you were talking about Interstellar 25 minutes ago. So
just because I didn't like it.
Oh,
too soon. According to Andy Weir, according to Andy Weir, The Martian takes place in 2035.
Oh, all right, cool. Wow, we're coming up on that.
Well,
11 years from now.
The book was written, 15 years ago?
Was it?
Yeah, the movie was about 10 years ago because it was 2015, and the book was written a couple years before that, so.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And NASA was consulted in order to get aspects of space travel accurate, specifically in relation to Mars, which is so cool.
That is pretty sweet.
Yeah. And most of the exteriors on Mars were shot inside Korda Studios in Hungary.
Oh, wow.
Now, they built the exterior for Mars in these studios because they are the biggest stages in the world currently.
No shit.
They are bigger than Pinewood Studios because they're 20 feet higher.
Wow.
They put up the biggest green screen in the world because they couldn't film on Mars. Sorry, it's not...
yeah, they couldn't Kubrick this one?
Completely practical, no. And because of that, they were able to build and drive the full-size rover at speed.
No way.
Yep, so that's a real vehicle.
Oh,
so badass. Wow. And build the full-size habitat for Mark Watney to go in and out of.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. The rest of the exterior shots they needed for Mars were actually shot in Wadi Rum, Jordan, which should be somewhat familiar to you because they were there to film Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
And so now that Martian rover that Matt Damon used is at the Royal Automobile Museum in Jordan as a thank you to the people of Jordan for their hospitality.
Very cool.
That's so cool. I know.
That is pretty sweet. Hell yeah.
And in those panoramic shots that they show of Mars, the mountain Olympus Mons is shown several times actually in this movie. The reason I bring that up just because it's so cool. It's a real mountain on Mars. It's the largest discovered volcano in the solar system.
Yes, it is.
It is almost 3 times larger than Mount Everest. Mm-hmm. It covers an area about the size of Missouri. And it's also twice as tall as Everest, extending to a height well beyond the atmosphere of Mars.
So nuts.
So rad. That's so cool.
Yeah, massive.
Yes. And at one point, Mark Watney has to dig up a radioactive power source so he doesn't freeze to death.
Oh, yeah.
It's real.
Oh, shit.
It's called a radioisotope thermoelectric generator.
No way.
Yep. And what they are is they're batteries. And the reason why I bring this up and the reason why I wanted to tell everybody in this trivia is that in the movie, it's a little hard to understand why exactly it's a heater for him, because he talks about it being a battery and how they use it for long-distance space missions. Okay, so it's a source of energy. How is it making it hot in his rover? The reason is because plutonium-238 is in this RTG. As it naturally decays, it generates heat. But plutonium-238 is pretty much impossible to turn into a nuclear weapon. Its radiation isn't dangerous. That is why Mark can put it in the rover and use it as a heater. And I wanted to explain that because that is one piece of the movie I was like, wait a minute, how exactly is this working?
Yeah, when he put it behind him, I was like,
what the hell?
Hang on a second.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
he explains a lot about it and like how it could kill people.
Right, exactly.
And you're just kind of like, so it's behind you.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
So are you going to come back to Earth with 3 heads? Like, what? I don't understand.
Right, yeah. Do you have... Yeah, no, I get it. I'm with that.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to explain it.
Nice.
So The Martian came out in 2015. It had a budget of $108 million. It came out on October 2nd, actually, so this year is going to be the 10th anniversary.
Nice.
In the U.S., it made $228 million, and worldwide, on $108 million, it made $630 million.
Nice.
It is President Barack Obama's favorite film of 2015.
Oh, wow.
He said it shows humans as problem solvers. That's why I like it too, so right there with you, bud.
There you go.
And the original cover page of the script was aboard the actual NASA Orion when it launched.
Oh,
on the cover
no way.
was a drawing of Matt Damon's character on Mars saying, I'm going to science the shit out of this planet.
Hell yeah.
Yes. And
that's awesome.
This movie was nominated for 7 Oscars. Production design, visual effects, which totally hold up to this day, by the way. I didn't even get into that, but holy shit, this movie looks so good 10 years later.
It really does.
Sound editing, sound mixing, which, yes, 2 different categories, and rightly so, because they had to create every single sound in this movie.
Definitely.
Drew Goddard got a nomination for adapted screenplay. Matt Damon was nominated for Best Actor, and it was also nominated for Best Picture. Unfortunately, it won none of them, which sucks.
Oh, that's too bad. And, speaking of the Oscars, I ran out of time, so I just want to include the nominations that Interstellar got for the Oscars of 2015. It was nominated for Best Achievement in Visual Effects, Best Music, Written for a Motion Picture, Best Sound Mixing, Best Sound Editing, and Best Production Design. It did end up winning for Best Achievement in Visual Effects, so my film is an Oscar-winning feature film.
My film should have been.
Indeed, I agree.
And lastly, real-life NASA astronaut Jessica Watkins said that while stationed on the ISS, the International Space Station, in 2022, during unscheduled downtime, the crew would watch The Martian.
Nice. That's awesome.
It is, and so that is The Martian. If you want to watch it, please give it a try. It is on HBO Max in 4K right now, so it's a great place to watch it. The sound is incredible too. Thank God it's not on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so happy to have talked about this film. I love it so much. Please, everyone, I hope you've either been reminded of it or now you'll give it a watch.
Absolutely. Completely worth the watch.
So those are our sci-fi versions of Saving Matt Damon. And John, would you watch Interstellar with your grandma?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I would. My grandfather would have loved it too, and I think my grandmother would have. I wish I would have watched it with her because I think it would have blown her away. And if you have not been able to see Interstellar, it is on Paramount Plus. You can stream it there. I watched my 4K 10-year anniversary edition.
I logged on to your Paramount Plus account and watched it there.
Hey, perfect. And V, would you watch The Martian with your grandmother?
Absolutely. I think my grandmother, who was the cop, would have really loved this film, for sure.
Awesome.
I think my dad's seen it. If not, both my parents need to watch it. I know most of my family loves this movie. Oh man, this movie's so good. I don't know anyone who doesn't like this film, actually. And in fact,
I don't either.
I don't know anyone who doesn't like Interstellar either.
Except for you.
I didn't like it. I just don't love it, okay? There's a difference.
Yes, I know. I'm just pulling your leg even though you don't love it. Yes, I'm with you. I don't know a lot of people that'll be like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No, Interstellar is an 8.5 out of 10 movie for me. It's a great film.
Okay.
I just don't love it. I just didn't get me the way it hits you in the heart.
Yeah, you said that already.
I know, sorry. Okay, sorry. Fair.
I can't wait to hear what our audience has to say about your opinion this week, Gavin.
Please, I'm really excited to hear. Please, I hope somebody at least is like, oh yeah, The Martian's way better.
It's not, but we'll see.
Oh, man. Okay, well, those are our picks for this week. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're really enjoying 2025 so far, and both of us are so excited for some of our upcoming recap episodes, and to continue telling you about the movies we've seen either in theaters or on streaming every week. And now I think it's time to talk about what we picked for next week.
Yes, let's do it.
I'm excited for this episode too, actually.
Oh, me too.
So, because of purely actions on my part, we lost several episodes in the month of October, our horror episodes, and we're still working on recovering those. Since we weren't able to give you guys several episodes of horror movies, we thought we'd have a little fun with next week and pick a couple horror comedies.
Oh, hell yeah.
So, John, why don't you tell everybody what you picked?
All right, I chose a film from 2012 directed by Tamir Beckman-Bedoff. This is based off of the graphic novel by Seth Grahame-Smith. This film stars Benjamin Walker, Rufus Sewell, Dominic Cooper, Anthony Mackie, Mary Elizabeth Winstead. This is Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. And if you care to follow along, you can rent it on Amazon Prime or on Apple for $3.99. I love this movie. It's so much fun. I can't wait to introduce V to it. V, what did you choose for next week?
I love horror comedy. It's one of my all-time favorite subgenres. So there were a lot of movies I could have picked, and all of them will be on the list in the future. But in order to pair properly with Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, I chose a movie from 2010 directed by the same man who directed Zombieland, which will also be on my list in the future. This stars Alan Tudyk, speaking of which, and it is called Tucker and Dale vs. Evil.
Nice. I've only seen it one time.
God damn.
So I'm looking forward to getting back into that one.
Oh, God, it's so funny. Well, until next week, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts. If you write a review, you will get a sticker from us. And you will also be entered to win one of our future reviewer request episodes. So really important and beneficial to you if you do write up a review for us. So thank you so much ahead of time if you do one. As you all know, we love to end the podcast with film is a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid. Oh, God. Okay. Except if you think
V's opinion about Interstellar is the correct one.
That was way tamer than you could have done, so thank you.
Yeah, we're still early on in 2025. I'm not sure if we're going to do next week's episode, but we'll see what happens.
All right, everyone. Until next week, bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.